Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's three prakim Rambam. We are starting with the final chapter of Hilchos Chiros Perek Shloisha Asar, and God willing, we're going to start the series of Hilchos She'ela Upikadem Prakim Aleph and Beis, starting first again with Hilchos Chiros Perek Shloisha Asar. This chapter deals with the final mitzvah of the series, which is the prohibition of muzzling an animal while the animal is doing work with food. This chapter has 7 halachas, beginning with halacha aleph. Says the Rambam. An animal should be given the opportunity. That's pshat oicheles. You don't have to stuff feed it, but it should be given the opportunity to eat whenever it's working with produce. Whether the produce is connected to the ground, whether it's already disconnected, and that whatever food it is carrying on its back, it may eat from it until it has been unloaded. In other words, if there's food on the back and Mustama smells it, so you have to allow the animal to eat from it. It's not that you give it, but if the animal wants to eat it, you may not prevent the animal from doing so. And halacha beis kol haminei behem melecha b'shas malacha. If you are preventing the animal, as we'll see, all different types of muzzling, not just the literal muzzle. It's going to warp in a second, Yakir. So then loike you get malkish and it says a pasuk in Parshas Kisei that loisach asoim shoyr b'dishoy, don't muzzle an ox while the ox is threshing, and we know the ox lavdafke threshing lavdafke echad ashoyr ve'echad kol mini behem v'chayim. And whether not only it's not any type, whether they're tameim or tahirim. Furthermore, the Torah speaks about threshing. But the echad adayish, it's not only if the animal is threshing, the echad she'ar kol malachis, if it's doing any work with produce that is shel gidulei karka, meaning even though it's not connected now, but it's something that grew from the ground. The Torah is speaking about the common scenario. However, that's all by a behema. By a human being. There, there is something about shard b'dishay, not only b'hoiva, but to emphasize only a balachayim and not a human being. Now, whether you are muzzling it while it's working, or whether you muzzled it prior to beginning to work, but you allow it, you leave it muzzled, equally prohibited. Even if you're not physically putting anything on the mouth of the animal. Every time the animal bends down to eat, you're screaming at it. And when you scream at it, the animal jumps. Furthermore, if you rented an animal and you muzzled it, and then you threshed with it, you get malchus. Top of that, you have to pay to the owner arbas kabin lepara ushloishas kabin lechamer, which is quite amazing. In other words, this is the amount of food that these animals eat per day. And whenever you are renting an animal, see here, when you rent a car in our world, if you don't give the car gas, you won't be able to travel with the car, but the car is not going to be farmazik. By an animal, it's more than that. In other words, when you rent an animal, part of the hischayvus of the renter is to feed this per day. So not only
say that once you rent the car, you have to bring the car back with some fuel amount. Took it out.
Okay, good. Now, hold on. Now there's one kasha. The kasha is, I get it, that when you rent an animal, if the agreement is you're going to feed the animal and you not allowing it to eat, you're chayiv to give to the owner the amount of food that you withheld from the animal. Now you have a kasha. What's the kasha? There's a rule. The rule is that ein aloiko mishalim. If you're getting malchus for muzzling it, how can you get malchus and have to pay? So the Rambam is answering it. When do we say ein aloiko mishalim? If your violation, which is mechayev malchus and mechayev mammon, is happening at the same time, that's when you don't get both penalties. The Rambam is explaining that they don't happen at the same time. Shemeshas meshicha, you're chayiv to give that amount of food from when you do meshicha, which is from when you actually legally begin this rental period. When a chayiv malchus only got yodesh ba chasuma. So since it's not happening at the same time, loike and mashal. Halacha gil. Yisrael adosh beperasi shel goy. If you're working with an animal of a goy, you are also over al bal tachsoim. It has nothing to do with who the owner of the animal is. It has to do with you that's working with the animal. And therefore, in the opposite, if you have a goy, hadosh beperasi shel Yisrael, the goy was given sheva mitzvos b'nei noyach, but the goy was not given this slav. Eino over mishum bal tachsoim. All right. Amar legoy. Now, if a person tells a goy, chasoim parasi, why don't you muzzle my animal and thresh with it? You understand? Now the guy is not mitzvah, but you're telling him to do it. Amir la'akol. Or yashav la'koitz b'fiyah, or if you indirectly muzzle the animal by putting a thorn in its mouth, and then you v'dashva. Now this animal won't be eating because it's uncomfortable in the mouth, right? It's not like chasama because this is more indirect. Or hirbetzladim b'chutz, you put a line in the vicinity. So this animal is sitting the whole time. That line is going to go get it. It's indirect muzzling. You put her child, and the behema has gaguyim for the child. You understand? When you have a lot of, when you're yearning, when you're missing, you lose your appetite. Or, and since the animal is chalishing to drink, when you need to drink more than you need to eat. You're not thinking about eating. You understand? Or paras oid al gaba hadaish, or if you spread a piece of leather on top of the grain that the animal is threshing, he doesn't see it. You understand? In all of these cases, you are not like now. What happens if it's threshing on a food that might look good, but it's not healthy food? And you know that if the animal were to eat now, it's going to become get diarrhea. So then muter lemana. Muter, why? And it's amazing. Halacha dal. Parashal Yisrael. Shahoya hakoyin dashba betruma. Now, this animal, just to know the rules, since this animal, Yakir, does not belong to a kohen, that's the rules. It may not eat truma. Garnished. In other words, truma can be eaten to the kohen and to the kohen's possessions, but it has to be the kohen's possession. Since this part belongs to a Yisrael, this animal cannot eat truma. Or it was dash, it was threshing. The trumas meiser shel vadai. The word vadai will be which means midoi raisa. The animal may not eat it. Again, it's truma. Chein paras hadashes b'meiser sheni, which is another interesting thing. See, meiser sheni is not private property. It's trample. The fact that I get to eat, so to say, my meiser sheni in Yerushalayim and HaKodesh, the way we view it is mamin gavoya, mishulchan gavoya. It's not mine. Or they veered off the path. It's not their grain. They happen to be working on someone else's tfuah. So in all of these cases, you're not violating elama, but there's a marasayinish. Like it's im hayadashis betrumais or b'maiser sheni, for there not to be marasayin. Maybe you take food that is similar to the food, the same type, that's not truma, that is yours, and so there are sacks that if Kavan is here, there's a good picture here in the Rambam from Evan Yisrael of Pashat what they would do to animals, taka. You know, so you have the same food in the sack. That whatever it's seeing, whatever it's smelling, that is the food the animal is eating, and that is only needed for meiser for marasai. And halacha hey hadosh b'meiser sheni shel demai. You see, when you have meiser sheni vadai, that food yakir midoi.
We mutal, not us.
Not only us, you're not allowed to give the animal that food. You have to muzzle it. Elamai, you got a problem. If I'm working on your field, I have to muzzle my animal. The whole reason why we're not allowed to be megadol behema daka midrabanan beretz Yisrael b'makam ha'yishuv is because when my animals walk, they eat. Just because I'm not threshing, my animal happened to be walking on your field. I have to muzzle it. But a guy that's looking at it is going to see me with my animal muzzled. For it not to look like I'm violating, give it food. Now, what happens if the problem is only midrabanan? That means midoraisa, this ma'aser sheni, right? It's not ma'aser sheni. It's only ma'aser sheni sholdamai or trumas ma'aser sholdamai. You have to understand something. Gedulei truma midrabanan has a din of truma midrabanan. Midoraisa, these foods are allowed to be eaten by the animal. So just because the Chachamim did not allow it, this is a isur drabanan of eating, cannot trump the isur doiraisa. Then oivim mishum bal tachsoi. Amazing. Now, what should you do? I think here again that Rambam is not saying that the animal should eat them, because midrabanan you can't eat from it. Here, not because of barasayin. I think that's what Rambam is saying. Here, I'm mechuyev midoiraisa to hang that sack around the animal's mouth. No, there's a marasayin issue. This is worse than marasayin. But since midoiraisa, this food is not truma, I have to give it to the animal. But one second, but midrabanan, I can't. Okay, so I hang the sack around the animal's mouth. Halacha. Rishoi balabayis laharif parasai ulasavko. The owner of the animal. Let's say I'm the balabayis yakid and you're the renter. Don't forget, I benefit. I'm the balabas. Whenever I rent the animal out, the mila is not only do I get a few dollars, but you feed my animal. I'm gonna ride with that. I won't feed the animal out of Yakir's rental because I know that you're gonna be threshing. Let him eat from you. I can make it hungry. I can aggrieve it. That's what I'm trying to do. You, the renter, not only are you paying me rent, you have to feed someone else's animal. So what could you do? You're threshing animal on top quality grain. You can give it hay. Now, one second, you're giving it hay prior to threshing. Once the animal is threshing and it's schmecking, the geschmack wheat, you can't give it hay. But prior to threshing, it's like what you do in a restaurant. They give you bread. They give you all sorts of food that costs garnished. So by the time they bring you the little steak for $90, you'll think you're satisfied because you are satisfied before you ate. That's why they make you wait. You understand? You can give the behemoths. You give the behemoth a lot of hay prior. So like this, once you start threshing, everyone can schlep it in their direction. Now, kayoytze, by going back to yesterday's dinim, that Rishoy Balabais lahashkis payalam yayin. We learned yesterday that in certain circumstances, the payalim that are working with gedulei karka, right, prior to Gemara Malachta and bringing it to Gemara Malachta, they can eat all the grapes they want. So if the Balabayis is smart, he'll make a lachaim with them prior. Like this, they won't eat that much grapes. Evidently, wine then was cheaper than grapes. If not, what is the Balabayis accomplishing? V'rashoyna payalim, and the opposite direction, litvar pitam betzir, prior to going to work. So we learned yesterday that while they're working, they can eat the anavim with something else. But prior to going to work, to eat something that's going to open up their appetite is zeichet permitted. Because everyone is allowed to do what they need to do, to chaparain, so to say, with the rights that the Torah granted them. Avol, however, you know what a worker cannot do. Now, from here until the end of the chapter, we're going to learn in the opposite direction, not the chusim that a worker has, but the responsibility that a worker has. A worker, as we all know that, if you don't sleep, you don't function well. So a worker cannot work malachtoi balayla. He's doing his own stuff at night, and then he rents himself out during the day. Because if the guy did his own work at night, how good of a worker will he be during the day? Garnished, he'll be exhausted. Or ladush bepayrasei arbes, he's using his own cow to thresh his own stuff at night, and then he's renting out his cow a day. Because he's thinking to himself, tomorrow I'm going to be working in your field, and I'm going to be able to eat from your whatever produce that I'm working with. I might as well give all of my food to my kids. Like this, I'll save money. Bottom line is, when I go to work from you, I'm starving. When a person is hungry, when a person is tired, they don't work as good. And that's called gezel malachta shabalabais. Shaharei yichshal koichai. The gashmias, your koyach will be sapped, your brain will be unclear, and therefore And on that line, the final halach of this chapter and of Hilchas Chidus, halacha zayin, that kederach shemusar balabayis shelo yigzar schal ani, can't steal, which is to decide not to pay him at all. V'lo yakvenu, not even to withhold it, as we learned yesterday. B'yoymer titan scharei kacha ani muzer shelo yigzar melechas balabayis. Don't steal the work that's due. How would you steal the work? By v'yebatel ma'at mekan ma'at mekan. You neglect a little bit here, you neglect a little bit there, you chapash was here, you chapash was there. Now let I do that. Because the whole day will be really one big deceit. You were hired to work, give it your all. Where do we see that? Every moment. As the guys we learned when we began learning the Rambam. Imagine. The Chachamim enacted a fourth bracha of benching. And when I am working for you, I don't make that bracha. If you remember, the Rambam even said, if I'm not mistaken, that the second and the third bracha are put together. Why? For me, how much time does it mean? So instead of benching taking me 4 minutes, benching is going to take me 2 minutes. So you 2 minutes, yeah. If I am being hired to work for you, don't waste 2 minutes. Not only is it bizman, but it's bekoyach, the quality. Chayav la'abed b'chol koychoi. Sharei Yaakov at Tzadik. Where do you find that expression? Not Yaakov Avinu, not Yosef. Yaakov at Tzadik, because this has to do with being at Tzadik. Tzadik means tzedek. So here we're calling him at Tzadik. He says in Parshas Vayetzei, ki b'chol koychi yavadati es avicha. That's how he became a Tzadik. Not because he shuckled in Shmona Esrei. You become a Tzadik because you're very honest. He was hired by Lavan. Lavan was constantly making ramois. Doesn't matter. Yaakov was honest, and as he said, he mamish worked his all. Ulafikach, this thing of being honest with other people's money is why not al schar zois apo elam hasan. That's the reason why. As it says, ish nishmar ma'oid. He became very, very wealthy. Why? Because b'dina de mamayna, he was honest with this fellow. And on that we say, Brich Rachmana, blessed is the merciful one that helped us conclude Hilchas Chidus. Let's start today's second chapter. So we are starting now the laws of She'ela and Pikad, the laws governing borrowing. Now, you guys, you have to appreciate that in Hilchas Chidus and Perek Rishon, the Rambam already began with the din of the four Shomer. And the Rambam says, Shomer Chinam, Shomerim, Shoyel. That was not the Seder of the Rambam. Now we're going to focus a lot on the Shoyel. Many dinim that we're going to learn in detail today is based on the klolim that we already learned in Schidus Perek Aleph. There's going to be a lot of review right now, but with a lot more detail. And also Pikadon. Pikadon means shomer, entrusted objects. So what's Estam? I'm sure people expounded on this a lot. Hilchas Schidus, the last few days we learned all about Schidus. Schidus Adam, Schidus Behema, the rights, the responsibilities. But the Rambam began Hilchas Schidus with the laws of She'el and Pikadon. The Rambam needed to do it because from the Dalet Shomrim, one of the Dalet Shomrim is the Soichet, just to understand how it works. But now we're going to go back and go into a lot more detail in the laws of the Shomrim, beginning with the Shoyel. And the Rambam writes, Yesh b'chlol and shtei mitzvahs aseh. The first is the law of the Shoyel, and number two, the din of the Shomer Chinam. Not the Shomer Sacher, the Shomer Chinam. Okay. Will be the prakim elo chavra, starting with Perek Rishon. Perek Rishon is about the achrayus that the shoyel has, and another detail, which is that how much time do I get to keep the borrowed article? Let's see what words were used and how we apply that bepoil. When can you demand from it back, and when can you not demand yet from it back? Even though I'm doing such good work with your utensil for free, that I'm using it all up. And if you borrowed me at X, there'll be nothing left when I give it back to you. We'll see. And okay, this chapter has 10 halachas, beginning with halacha Aleph. It says that Amam Hashoel Kli. If a person borrows a utensil, or if a person borrows an animal, Mishar Mitaltalin, any other movable article, from a skalik. Then the Ovad Oinikna, if it was stolen, it was lost or stolen. Furthermore, afilu nenas oines gadol, something that was completely beyond my control happened. For example, nishbara, the animal was taken captive. Nishba was taken captive. Nishbara, the animal was injured. Habehema, or the animal died. Here you have a borrower, as we explained in the previous series, that the borrower gets the most benefit. He gets to use without pay. So hand in hand, it always works the way. The more chosim, the more achrayis. That's life. You have less achrayis, less chosim. You don't get both ways. Even though it was an oinus. As it says, ki yishal ish me'imre'eyu, v'nishbar oimeis. In the case where ba'alav ein imay, as we're going to review now with more detail, if the owner is not with you, as will be explained, then shalim yishalim. And what's the examples of the Torah? Oinus. If you're chayiv for an oinus gadol, kol shchein v'kal v'chaymer, you're chayiv by Geneva and Aveda, where you have a certain amount of responsibility. If you would have washed it even better, maybe it would not have happened. That you chayiv even for oinus, that's b'shenenas. If this oinus happened not while you were doing that for which you borrowed the animal. If you borrowed an animal, and you said you're borrowing it to plow, and you used it to plow, not to thresh. You used it bidiuk for that which you said. But if it died prior to plowing or after plowing, or if you were riding on the animals, you made a shinoi, or you threshed, in other words, when we say that mesa machmas malacha, even the shoyel is spotted, it's mesa machmas the malacha for which you borrowed the animal. If you took an animal in order to take it to a certain location, while you were taking it, and now let's move on to a keli similar. You borrowed a bucket and you said in order to use it to get water out of a pit. The nikra got torn, it got destroyed while you were using it for that purpose. You borrowed an axe. Lafatzel boy ate some to chop wood. The nishbad, and it broke pitzel boy while you were chopping the wood because of the chopping of the wood. In other words, it broke while you were doing that for which you borrowed it for. Because ella lasis but malacha zu. Bahare loishina. Halacha base. Now he starts the dintaita. The shoyel says, the borrower says, hold on, and if that were to be true, he'll be exempt. So if you remember what we learned before, right? Aid ein ba, and Chazal learned that if you could have aidim, you have to bring aidim. We're going to apply this now to the borrower. If the place for which you borrow to use it in is a place makim shebenei adam mitzuyim sham, which means that it's halachically highly likely that people would have witnessed that which you are claiming, then yavi raya. Raya means edim. Shemesa oinensa b'shas malacha v'shaloi shinova. You have to bring two things. It died while you were doing that, and you made no other shinoi, and then indeed via pater. But if you don't bring a raya, you can't swear. Yishat meshalein. But if you borrow to use this, let's say to fill up earth inside your churba, which means in a makim where you don't have other people there, but it's betoich beisoy. Now it's the aid. No one is there. The nikra baboy. So I guess if you got lucky and heavy raya, then you don't even have to take it off. No doubt about it. The imlav, we don't say if you can't bring a raya pay. Here's where we say Yishava hashoyel shvuas hashoimnim shemesam b'shas malacha, as we learn by the Shomer Chino, as we learn by the Shomer Sacher. He also gets them to take that oath. It's a biblical oath, and via pater v'chein chol chayoytze bozeh halacha gimel shoyel kli mechaveiroi. You borrowed a utensil v'nishbar and it broke. Now you have to pay. How do you pay? So the big difference we learned until now was that nizikin, gezela. By gezela we said pay. By nizikin we said give back the broken item, make an assessment, and the difference of price is that which you have to pay. The latter applies over here as well. The same type of evaluation that we have by the laws of damages, which means it's not like You loaned me a watch. This watch is worth 100. The watch broke. I'm not chayiv to give you 100. I give you back the broken watch. The broken watch is worth 10, and I only have to give you 90. And the borrower gets at least, and then they pay the difference. Same thing, you give back the nevela. If a person borrows an animal, and guys, we had this in the previous segment, that aside, there we even spoke about a renter, even a renter, certainly a borrower. That means a borrower means I'm not even paying you for it. I get to use it, but I am chayiv to feed your animal. Chayiv from when halachically the borrowing began. When did it begin? If you remember, we learned consent doesn't begin it. A kinyan is needed. Till when it starts. Now comes the question: what happens if it's meat? Depreciated. Same thing, guys. I'm chayiv, even though ma'onis. Chayiv l'shalem mashapachas ubedamel. When will I not be chayiv? If the only reason why the meat of the animal became depreciated is because it did the work for which I borrowed it. That's called mesa machmas malacham pater. Same thing over here. Kochash b'sara machmas malacham pater. Elama, how do you know it happened? So you have to take an oath. Halacha hey. If you guys would come into the tent, you'll be so cold, you'll wake up. If you don't learn mitchayis, you'll push it become an icicle. Halacha hey. What does that mean, guys? Now we're going into a new topic. When does the borrowing end? So it has to do with what was said when I took it. Stam means no one said for how long. What do you think? If I borrow something, Zelig, and I don't say for how long. So the lender gets to take it back whenever the lender wants. Not the borrower says, we never made up a time, I get to keep it forever. No. If you didn't make up a time, so then Hadei Hamashil, the owner, the lender, Machziroi, he recalls it whenever he wants. I'll give you an example, guys. When there's a loan, just to remember the dinim. If I lend you money, or if you lend me money, and we never made up, when do I have to repay? There's a rule. Stam halva shloishim yoyim. Before 30 days, you cannot ask for it back. You can ask. I'm saying, I'm not chayiv to pay you back. That's by halva. We don't say that by she'ela. We don't say stam she'ela shloishim yoyim. If we didn't make up a time, you can lend something to me. A minute later, say, shkoyach, I did you the favor. Thank me. Give it back. Okay. Sha'ol this man katsu, but if they said for an amount of time, then kivan shemashach v'zachabai, not when they agreed, when they did the actual kinyan, then since they made up, then the owner, which is the lender, cannot recall it. And even if meis hashoyel, the borrower died, the lender cannot ask it back from the yarshim. That's big. We don't say, I only loaned it to your father. No. And now, how do we know that? Why not? So the Rambam, the dinu, came in this here. You missed the big picture, but it's okay. We forgive you. The dinu, it's only here. You come 5:30, you're late. I love it. 5:30 is late. Halikeyach, when a person buys something, what happens when you buy something? Koina haguf kinyan oilam, through the money that you gave. When a person receives a gift also, you own the item itself. Even though you gave nothing. Let's go to the Soicher. We're going to see, the Rambam is contrasting a Likeach and a Makabal Matana versus a Soicher and a Shoyl. See, they don't have a king and a guf, but they have the rights to the payers. For a specific amount of time. So now, which is that what? Think about that. In other words, when a guy sells something, we don't say, Yakir, that if the guy that bought it passes away, the seller gets it back from the heirs. No, he got it. Same thing. Same thing when you give a gift. Reuven gave a gift to Shimon. Shimon passed away. Reuven cannot call it back. So similarly, kacha mashal kemaskid. When you rent something, what's the din? We all know that. The guy that rented it, if he passes away, his heirs keep it. It was rented. You rent an apartment. The guy that signed the contract passed away. It's not an ois contract. The contract goes on. Same thing by a loan. Okay. Now, based on the above, I got it. So someone borrowed a cow, lisman katzuf. So the lender cannot recall it, but the heirs are chayiv just like their father was chayiv. Oh, I'm sorry. More than that. Ein chayavim ba'anasel. Wow. When someone borrowed a cow, now that we said the borrower passed away, the heirs keep it until the end of the prescribed time. The children are not chayiv ba'anasel. Wow. How is it's amazing. In other words, they never borrowed it. Big din this. Even though it's not theirs. Why do they have it? Because the father, when a person borrows, he's makabel achrayis even for oinus. The children never makabel achrayis koinus. You know what the din of the children will be? Shemer sacher. Even though they're not, they at least are chay for geneva and aveda. Not only do they get to keep it, but they have less achrayis. It's amazing. Another, if the children didn't know that it's not their father's, they thought it belongs to their father. So they shechted the animal and they ate it. So they're not so achrayis. What mishalman de basar bezoil? The basar bezoil, we already spoke that out. Is whatever the market price it is, they only pay 2/3 of it. You know, it's all predicated on the fact that the heirs are not chayiv ba'oinus. However, if the father left nechasim, now the nichsei ha'av, we're speaking about real estate, are meshubed to the chayvus of the father. That's different. So the father is chayiv in oinus. If the father left nechasim, then the children will have to give from that nechasim for the oinus. Not yet. Because the father was meshubed for answer. If the father left no nechasim, that is where we say they're pater by oinus. Umeisa oy shetifachua mishalmim as domeh, not the mei basar bazal, not 2/3, the whole thing. Me nechasav big halacha. Shol kelem chaveiroi to borrow a utensil, and you specified for what? Lasses by melacha ploinis. So here, Chevra, it's not that you set a time, but you set a job. Can you lend to me your axe because I'm building a home? If I linked the loan, the borrowing, for a certain task, I get to keep it until the task is done. And therefore, ein hamashal, the lender, yochel achziroi mitachas yodi achi yasa oisem Allah. Similarly, I'm borrowing an animal to go from here to there. I'm going to New York. I need your donkey. Because that's what it meant. Good. Lend me your spade to hoe this orchard. If I said this, only this. And I cannot use it for another orchard. The Rambam is not only saying you can't hoe 2 orchards. If I change my mind, I won't use it for this. Only for that. You can't. He didn't lend it for that. If he said pardes tam, but pardes b'loshen yachid, then the borrower picks one. Which one? The one that the borrower wants. My orchards, all of my orchards. That's what it means. Now, what happens if while I am hoeing, the iron of the spade is wearing out? There is no point where I have to stop. I'm doing exactly, that's called Mesa Machlis Malacha. I give you back the wooden handle. You have to understand what type of toiva you're undertaking when you're lending something. That's the din. The person is borrowing a keli to use it. Listen to these words. Lend me this item. Listen to these words, Jacket, according to your generosity. What's that according to your generosity? We don't have to abide by the rules above. According to the goodness of your heart, according to your generosity. Which means you're very generous. You allow me to keep it longer than usual. If the lender did not say, guys, thank you, I know you think I'm generous. I'm not as generous as you think. No, he was quiet. The guy really buttered him up. Your generosity means l'olam vod. It's basically like asking for a gift. When there's nothing left from it, then you give him back the broken pieces. However, one thing is that the borrower cannot make it useful again. If the guy says, I'm not following the regular rules, I'm borrowing this bit toivas according to your generosity, but he has to explain to him, you're this real generous guy. I know you. You're not like other people. You're going to allow me to keep it for as long as I need it. That's what the guy agreed to. Then I can keep it lo'olam. But one thing about it, if once it starts to break, I can't fix it to keep it longer. Without any effort, I get to use it until there's nothing left of. Halacha 9. Halacha 10. Ha'omer l'chaveri. Hashileni shoykis zu shalmayim. Lend me. Now, a shoykis is a certain, let's say it's a stone that has a hollow in it that people would put water in it. V'nersa, and it got destroyed. So here again, there's nothing left. Is any yachal of nice? I cannot fix it. You know what I need to do? I have to give you back the broken parts. But that's because I said shoykazu. Shoykazu was broken. But if I say shoykastam, so then I can fix it. The borrower can fix it and still use it. All my life, the borrower tells the lender, Hashileni, the place of the shoykis. That's even a greater ask. If the mashal agreed, im konem yad mashal le yashol boine v'hoylech bekarka mashal acho tabel yod shoykis she'ef shalei lahashkes v'meno behem toye artze k'mayshis k'ya mashal. Then this guy gets to make a shoykis and to use it until whenever. You have to, when you lend something, you have to understand what you are agreeing to. And the final halach of this chapter, halacha yud, if a person borrows a hotel, what does it imply? We had this in the previous series. So the wordings are important. If a guy says to the lender, can you please lend me your hotel to sleep? If you ask to sleep, sleeping means one night. If the person, guys, we had this in Luchas Chiras Peirik Vav. If he uses the words to keep for Shabbos, and we explained over there in Luchas Chiras, Shnei Yom doesn't mean 48 hours. Shnei Yom means that he gets to keep it from Friday morning until Motzei Shabbos. It's taka one night, but it's 2 days and 1 night. Lelina is 1 day and 1 night. The Shvi says 2 days and 1 night. If he says, can you please lend me your pundek linasuyin, it means 30 days. However much time that is. In other words, when I go to a base oval, just to know the halach yelech, you don't hang out in the base oval the whole day. Not because you don't do it, because the oval doesn't like it. You go and you come back. So if you say I'm borrowing it to go to a Beis HaMishnah, when you go to a wedding, be there the whole day. No, it's people spend a lot more time with the chassan and kala because they appreciate it a lot more than a person who's in mourning. I'm making my party, my wedding party in it, then it means at least for 7 days. Which is today's third chapter. Today's third chapter is about the rule of she'ela b'ba'alim. I know we mentioned this in Al Chaschidus, if I'm not mistaken, even in the first chapter. So on one hand, the borrower has the most level of responsibility, other than Mesa Machmas Malacha. He's chayiv even for an oinus god. However, now again, that will be this din if while the borrower borrowed an object, the owner of the object was also in the service of the borrower. In the service means, as we'll see, whether he was paying him for a service, whether he was asking him a favor, but while he took the item, the owner came along with it. Not the owner came along with it only to work with it. If I am borrowing your car, can you please lend me your car? Guys, don't do this because I bring up all my cars. At least you should know that lachatchila. And you know what? When you're bringing me the keys to your car, can you bring me a cup of water? The cup of water has nothing to do with the car. It just means that the lender is giving himself over to the borrower at the time that he's giving over the article. That's called she'ela. The Torah says that even if the borrower was negligent and through his negligence something happened to the article, the borrower is patur. No good deed goes unpunished, guys. That means if you really, really, really do a taiva, you're not going to get nothing. Perek Sheni has 11 halachas, beginning with halacha. Hashoyel b'ba'olam. A person borrows an article, yakir, that's the taich, while the owner is working with him. While the owner is working with him. Then, afilu nignaf or yavad, the chiddush is, through mamish negligence, means it's prishia. The Rambam is not saying, I just want to point out something that I have a question mark on. The Rambam is not saying that if he damages it, biyodayim, he'll be patur, even though it's mashma like this soon. But if you remember in Hilchos Chidus, the Rambam already said that even where mitzad din shoymrim, you are exempt, mazik, you can't be mazik. You can't be mazik. If you're mazik, biyodayim, forget about the fact that you're a borrower. You're not a borrower. If I damage your stuff, we learn Hilchos Niskei Mam, and I'm chayiv to pay l'choyrim. It's mashma a bit different later, but let's go with that understanding. The word here is that if I was not mazik your stuff, but I was very negligent, and because of my negligence, it got ruined. Here I'm going to be exempt. Patur. Because the Torah says in Ba'al of Imai, clearly in Parshas Mishpatim, lo yishalim. But what's the meaning of she'ela b'ba'alim ubilvad she'ishal ha'ba'alim tchilam? Oh, yimach chayfetz. Two scenarios. Number one, prior to borrowing, the owner was already working with me. One example we'll give some guys is that if I hired you out to work for me. Let's say that you are a great sharecropper. You're working for me. During the period of your working for me, can you please lend me your animal? Or even if you were not working for me prior to the act of lending, but you agreed to work for me while you gave the article, not later. Either you started prior or you started at the same time. Now, it doesn't make a difference if this working with the borrower was for free or whether it was for pay. In other words, whether it is I just asked you for a favor or I paid you for it, doesn't make a difference. And also, it doesn't have to be that the owner is working with the borrower with the article. Has nothing to do. It can be with a complete different job, like we gave an example. Can you please lend me your car? And I'm asking you another toiva. And when you bring me your car, can you please bring me a cup of water? You're working with the article. And the malacha acheres that Rambam wants to make point, it doesn't have to be a chashuva work. It can be l'shum davar ba'olam. Like I gave an example, bring me a cup of water. It's not a malacha. Do me a favor, give me a drink. And while you are bringing the water, as he's giving him the water and he's giving him the animal, that means it's happening at the same time. That's called she'ela b'ba'alim. And what did we learn in Hilchos Chidus? even if when the animal that I borrowed got damaged because I was negligent complete, you gave me water a month ago. You loaned me an animal for 2 months. Doesn't matter whether you were working with me when the damage happened. It has to do with the zman of the she'ela. Potter. But if first I made a kinyan, when I made the, which means when I initiated the period of borrowing, at that moment, the owners were not at all subservient to me. Even though a minute later, forget about a minute later, a second later, oh, can you please bring me a cup of water? I already did Mashiach. No. The clear. Halacha base. If I'm borrowing an animal for free, or I'm renting it, because the Rambam already paskin that even though the Torah speaks about she'ela bebalim by she'ela, the Rambam said clear that this din goes to all of the Dalet Shomim. All of the Dalet Shomim have this exemption of she'ela bebalim. That's why the Rambam already is going over here to heshel behemtoi or to the soicher. The soicher is like the nicest soicher. Kishitas Rabbi Yehuda, as we learned in the beginning of Schiris. The yotze imoy lisoit hashoyel, and the owner went out to help the borrower. In other words, guys, he didn't even ask of him. You understand, Yakir? The owner himself went to help. He's helping him load the animal. That's Shmira B'Ba'alav. But that the owner was doing something, biyadayim, not watching. What's that watching? He came not to help me. He came to protect his. He came to make sure that me, the borrower, I don't abuse his animal. So that's a big difference. In other words, he has to be doing something for my benefit and not coming for his benefit. If he's coming, right? That's shmiras behem toy. That's a inish shmira beba'al. Halachim. Alamet tinoikes, teachers of young children, or that means he's working for the whole city because he is chayiv to teach all of the young kids of the shtetl. Or if a person was hired to plant trees, not for Reuven, but trees for the whole city, which means that he's now working for the whole city. You understand? A person who was hired to be the bloodletter of the city. Or if a person is hired to be the scribe for the city. So the din is, think about it. If someone is hired to be a scribe, it doesn't mean they're writing documents the whole day. It does mean that if someone is hired to be today's city scribe, they have to be available, that if anyone during that day would come and ask them to write a document, they have to write it. That's called they are then in service of the city, even if they are passive then. So during that day, if I go over to that scribe and I say, can you please lend me your animal? If I will be negligent, I'll be patur. Because the owner was meshubed, not to me, to the city. I live in the city. If during that day if this guy will lend, if he'll rent to any one of the city people, and therefore, again, I think it doesn't mean biyadayim. I think he was very negligent. He'll be pater. But in the opposite direction, if the scribe during that day is borrowing something from the city people, I'm not meshubah to him. However, there's an exception. You can say pshitim. The Rambam is building up to halacha daled. When do we say that the teacher is meshubah to the talmidim? Right? When do we say the teacher is working for the students? That's normally a teacher. But there are certain teachers that they have the prerogative to choose the topic that they want to teach and the time when they want to teach. Then we view the students being in service of the teacher. In other words, if he's not hired to teach from this hour to that hour, even though he's being paid to be available to teach, but if the Rav gets to pick the topic that the Rav wants and the time that the Rav wants, we view that relationship that the Talmidim are serving the Rav. When the Rav wants, not when the Talmidim wants. Oh, it's both the time and the topic. And they have to come when the Rav calls. I love it. The Rebbe, there was no greater Eved of the community than the Rebbe. But on the other hand, the Rebbe, when the Rebbe wanted, the Rebbe spoke what the Rebbe wanted. And whenever the Rebbe came out, we came running. So we are Zeicha. We are in service. Halavai, we should be Zeicha to be in service. The key is that as long as the teacher has the license, Yakir, to change, he's learning one Masechta that Rav can wake up one day. Our Rosh Yeshiva here, the Rosh, is to decide we're fabringing the whole day. We can be learning Masechtas Pesachim. You can come and say he's giving today a share Masechtas Bava Kama, and no one will say boo to him. So then we are in service to him. But even such a Rav, guys, there is B'Yom HaPerek. B'Yom HaPerek is that they designated, this is something that changed technically because we have printed Svarim. But prior to having printed Svarim, right, whether it is a Machlokes Tanoim, 2 weeks before Yom Tiv, we pass on 30 days before Yom Tiv, that the teacher is mechuyev to teach the halachas of that Yom Tiv. You understand? Even such a teacher at that time is meshuvah to the people. Then it changes because then he is mechuyev to teach. You know, we're coming to Purim, which means 30 days before Pesach. The teacher is mechuyev to teach Hilchos Pesach. Parenthetically, we pass on today that since you have Svarim, the rabbi, the Rav, just has to encourage people that they should review, but doesn't have to teach it because it's already taught. Go online and go find a good class. How great. Now let's go. If a person tells a shliach, sail v'hishoel im parasi, go out and work together with my cow, which is amazing. In other words, the owner is lending his animal. The owner is asking a shliach to work with the animal, to work with the borrower. Is that she'ela b'balim? If you were to apply shliach shaladam kamaisi, then the answer would have been yes, but we don't apply it over here. Eina she'ela b'balim, because here it has to be the owner mamish. Shenemer im ba'alav imoy, which means haba'alam atzmam v'lo shlucham. That he's a shliach, that means he's an independent person. But if a person tells to his Evet Kanani, say v'hishalim parasi, Evet Kanani is different. Because the goof of the Evet Kanani is Kanal Adoinei. The Hasidus here, you see, when we learn about the Evet Kanani is like the Rasha, the Evet Ivri is the Benini, the Amavri is the Tzaddik. There is a mile of the Evet Kanani. Always. Dafka, the Evet Kanani, on the lowest level, his goof is Kani to the other. The greater he is, then the more of a Metzias he is. Evet Kanani is property of the other, and therefore, no, in other words, halavai, we should be that way. We're not saying that we should be the shoyim. What we're saying that there's something always, the lower has always something higher. There's always an advantage. Because sheyad evet kiyad rabbi, more than shlichus, but that's only an Evet Kanani. Nishal ha'eved ima shlamidas rabbi. Even the Evet Kanani, if the Evet Kanani chooses to work for the borrower, that doesn't do anything. In other words, when do we say yad ha'eved ki yad rabbi? It's only when the adin was masking. You understand that he's not masking. He doesn't know. Forget the eved is not enough of a metzias to do something unilaterally. The eved is the rabbi when he's doing exactly what the rabbi said, not when he's doing what he said. Halachivav. If a person borrows an article from a woman, we're speaking about a married woman, and the husband is performing a task for the borrower. Here also, because the relationship that the owner has in her stuff is only on the level of paytas, not on guf. So it's not that this article belongs to the owner. He's not the owner. Now, let's go like this. If a person borrows property from his wife, the wife is also obligated to him, the obligations of marriage. Is that called she'ela b'ba'alim? Or Shutvim sheshoalu zeh mizeh. Hareizu she'ela b'ba'alim. Yes. But if one partner says, Hashileni hayoim v'na'ashil cholam machar, that's different. Then they're making a deal. Very good. Even though the partners, because the very fact that he's saying that today me, tomorrow you, so they're not, that's it. Then he gave up today for tomorrow. So right now he doesn't own it. Halacha 8. Shol min hashutfim. Now, what happens if you borrow from a partnership? Now, guys, if I borrow something from a partnership and only one of the partners are working with me, you get it? That's the kasha now. This belongs to Reuven and Shimon. Reuven and Shimon are lending this to me, and I'm asking Reuven, pour me a cup of water, but only one of the partners. The other direction. If partners are borrowing an item from one owner, but that one owner, when he gave it to the partnership, is working for one of the partners. That's already a suffix. And whenever you have a suffix, again, the halacha will always be which would mean over here, if the animal died. Now, death is a oinus, but we say that if it's she'ela b'ba'alim, they're patim. Here you have a question. If you have a question, you want to be moitza the mammon from the borrower in a mashalim. But on the other hand, if the owner was tafsu ba'alim, now they are in possession of the money. Ein mitzin miyada. So what does the guy do? He chaps it back. So you have two chappers and Beis Din doesn't do anything. They can't. Pasha b'hashomer. Pasha b'hashomer. Here's a big chiddush. In other words, shir. She'ela b'ba'alim, you're going to be pater. The Rambam says that if you have a suffix, if the animal died, the oinus gadol, you're going to go with that sad ha-suffix. But if you were p'sheya, you got to pay. I love it. Because how can you not pay for p'shia? For you not to pay for p'shia, you have to prove bevadai that it was she'ela b'ba'alim. Even though the money is in your pocket. Beautiful. Halacha 9. If a person is borrowing an animal to sodomize it, he's borrowing it for a sin. He's borrowing an animal to show off with it. He wants to look like a wealthy knacket. Or stay parties together. Now all the work that he needs is together, one pruta. In all of these cases, he's a suffix she'ela b'ba'alim. And therefore, we applied the end of halacha ches to here as well. Halacha yud. She'ela b'ba'alim. Schara she'ela b'ba'alim. Now listen, guys, halka. A person borrowed an animal. Guys, listen. I borrowed an animal, and at that time, I asked the owner to bring me a cup of water. The borrowing ended. But I didn't return it to you and re-rent it. The animal is with me. Now I'm telling the owner, do me a favor. Let me give you money and let me rent it. Now I understand that the achrayis of she'ela is much greater than the achrayis of schiris, right? For borrowing, I'm chayv even bo'enis. For schiris, I'm only chayv an gedei v'vavev. Now the animal is still with me. I did not return it. And it's a new agreement. When I rented the animal, you were not working for me. Now I want to know whether we said it's all about how it began. So if it would have still been borrowed, I don't care if you're not working for me right now, it's she'ela b'ba'alim. But I changed the terms prior to returning it. And I changed it down. It means less achrayis. That's the case. The thing is that since I changed it in a way that I went down in my responsibility, I'm less responsible, so the merit of she'ela b'ba'alim continues. But the very fact that schirus makes me even less achroi makes sense for me to extend the exemption of achrayis from she'ela b'ba'alim. Because she'aschirus teluya b'she'ela. Gewaldige words. Since I'm not mekabel nu achrayis, that's the key. Since I'm not mekabel nu achrayis, I'm not making a new agreement. I'm not machayev myself more. If I am not machayev myself more, the exemptions that I had continue. But in the other direction, I began as a renter. And when I rented it, I'm already said, goes on all of the dollar train. I'm going to pay you for your rent a donkey. I'm paying you for that. And then I know, please bring me a cup of water. So God forbid. Now I know that no matter what, even if I'm posheya, and because of that, the animal gets damaged, I'm pot. Instead of me giving back the animal at the end of the rental, I asked you to lend it. You lent it to me, but over here, I'm a kabul nu achrayis. I went up in responsibility. Now there's no obligations. So now that there's no obligations, we consider this like a new hischayvus. And then the Rambam gives even better. Listen to this now. Oy shesha'olam beba'olam. It began as she'ela. V'chazarus chalash lei beba'olam. That which is the beginning of halacha yud. And at the end of the rental agreement, I still did not return it to you. I again got it to you as a borrower. So
you borrowed, you rented it,
and he borrowed again. Now the borrow and the borrowing, if it would have been a continuation, there's no shiloh. Here it went down, and then from the schirus I went back up. So here you can argue that even though it began as borrowing, if I go from renting to borrowing, I took upon me more achrayis. And I'm using the logic. The moment I took more achrayis, at that moment I need she'ila b'ba'alim. Or maybe not, because it began with she'ila. I'm not taking more achrayis in the beginning. That's already the doubt over here.
Yeah, but you done. You do achrayis, and then you
less, and then I went back to the way it used to be.
Yeah.
Now the question is whether it's a break. Okay. It began as chirus, and I went back up. That's already clear. If I go back up, if it would have been over here, I would be chayiv for pshia. But then I went back down again. So call elu suffix shmira be'alami. And again, why do you do with the suffix like you learned in Allah Ches? Yavaldik. Mesa ena mishalim. Tosfu ha'ba'alim emitzim niyadam. This rule. Pasha ba, you chayiv to pay. The final Allah Yudalev. Ishish. What? It's fast, guys. We started early, even though we started late, but we were up having. I had coffee anyway, so might as well learn. Isha she'ela. Listen to this: a woman borrows an article, and then she gets married. Now, what did we learn, that if the father borrowed something, the children get to use it, right? But they use it as borrowers, even though we said they're not chayiv and oinus. Here, she gets married. Now, how do we view the husband? I want you to know the husband is not viewed as borrowing it from her. The husband is not viewed as someone who's renting it from her. Even though the husband gets to use the paytas, we view the husband's rights in that article like a loikeach. That's the takonas chachanim. And therefore what? I want to say something very important. And therefore, if we would have viewed the husband as a shomer, what would have been the din yakir? Then the husband would be chayav for something. If we view the husband's rights in his wife's stuff, that's not even hers. She borrowed it. Like a loikeach, if I buy something from you, I'm not chayav at all in achrayis. He's not chayav in achrayis, but she is chayav in achrayis. And therefore, listen to this. And while the husband was using the animal's borrowed cow, the animal died, the husband is spotted. The husband, the guy's a shoyel, is chayiv b'oinus, not the husband. Even though he's using it and it's a borrowed animal. She never even got to use it. And listen to this, even if he was pasha. Pasha means, again, not mazik. And this pasha means he was so negligent, which is why the animal died. Why is he exempt? Because the Chachamim said, Shehu keloikeach. But hold on.
What would be his din if she left him during the lekicha?
Then he has to give the animal back to her. He only has it because he's married to her. Now, 1 second. He's exempt, but she's chayiv. Only challenge is that during the marriage, she doesn't have money because whatever she owns, he owns. 1 second. But practically, when will she pay the owner? Only kishiyah l'shalom, only when she'll have money. Which means Someone gives her those types of gifts that you can give, or a divorce, or if he predeceases her. But all of the above is the husband didn't know that. If she notifies the husband, in other words, the moment he knows it's borrowed, he's makabel achrayis. There's a logic here. Since he didn't know, and the Chachamim says, you get married, whatever your husband, whatever your wife owns during the marriage, you get to use. You're chayiv to her, that's your rights. You cannot be held responsible. The chiddush is you're not held responsible even if you are posheya. Again, I don't think posheya means biyodayim, it means negligence, which is why something happened. Now, says that Rambam, kol shomanu shisha ba'olim, all this entire pedic is not only by borrowing. The Torah uses the words, the Torah tells us, ba'alav ein imoi, shalom yishalem. The Torah says, ba'alav imoi, you're parted by she'ela. It's not only for that shoymet, it's for all of the other three. If you are soiched, if you're a noisa sached, harei yishmira ba'alam u pater. It goes and saying all of the rules we learn now. All of the rules that we learned by She'ela goes to the other Shemdim as well. Givaldik. We continued. So guys, just to say that since Purim we daven late, relative. So again, I don't know, we'll see how big that tomorrow. Be'erech 7:30, 7:35 here in the tent.